I was asked to record a lesson that I did on joy recently, and in light of the present COVID-19 pandemic, I hope that this proves to be a timely and fitting lesson for us during this challenging time. I've entitled this Finding Joy in the Midst of Crisis. It will be broken down into shorter segments for ease of viewing and attention span. And so I hope that you can listen to all the segments to really glean the most from the entire lesson. So here's part one. A simple definition of joy from the dictionary says a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. There are things, though, that can steal our joy if we define it this way, right? But this is not necessarily a spiritual definition of joy, the kind of joy that cannot be stolen. Our joy will absolutely ebb and flow if it comes from our circumstances. It's a fact that a lot of things in life will bring grief and sadness. I've read that there are 43 different types of circumstances that can cause grief. 43. And every person and every situation is different when it comes to grief. And therefore, no other human can really understand. But in Proverbs 14, verse 10, the Bible says, each heart knows its own bitterness, and no one else can share its joy. This tells me only God can truly understand, because only God knows each of our hearts. Only God can truly comfort us. He is, as the Bible says, the God of all comfort. We have to also accept the truth that we see in Psalm 34, verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. He's close to the brokenhearted. Why do we get angry at God thinking that we deserve no suffering when there's suffering all around the world all the time? The key is accepting it and processing it spiritually. We will absolutely still feel sadness in our life from time to time. That is normal and natural. And again, everyone's grief is different. So where do we get, though, an everlasting joy? A joy that cannot be stolen. This kind of joy, as we've said, cannot come from our circumstances. Jesus told us in John 16:33 that in this life we will have trouble. It's a fact. But he also says that in him we can have peace. He tells us to take heart because he has overcome the world. And our joy, another thing our joy can't come from is God answering our prayers the way we want, exactly the way we want and when we want. He's not a genie that we can control. I saw a TV episode once, a friend showed me that this does not equal this. And I love that. And I think we have to really be careful about thinking that we can control God that way. We can actually really damage our faith, really shipwreck our faith if we think we can control God in that way, which is really a pagan point of view, if we think that. But that's another lesson for another time. But here are 7 things that the true expert on everything, God himself, says should bring us joy. And we must remember that even in hard times, the Bible has got to be our standard. I hope we'll ask ourselves if these following bullet points that I'm going to make and the corresponding scriptures are truly what bring us joy. First, God's presence brings us joy. And we see that in Psalm 16, verse 11. You make known to me the path of life. You will fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. Secondly, God's commands and his never-changing truths give us joy. That's actually what brings security in this ever-changing world with ever-changing thoughts and ever-changing feelings. That gives us security. We see that in Psalm 19, verse 8. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. And then we also see that in Psalm 119, verse 111. Your statutes are my heritage forever. They are the joy of my heart. Thirdly, the gift of salvation, being with God forever and looking forward to that. This brings us joy. Salvation, as we know, is already, but not yet. We have to persevere till the end. So we have to remember that salvation and that all this is only temporary. We see that in Psalm 51, verse 12. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. You know, David wrote this when he had lost his joy because he was in sin. So sin definitely will zap our joy. But having the joy of our salvation, that's an awesome thing. Fourth, God's unfailing love should bring us joy. Never doubt it. Never question it. He's the only one who will never disappoint us. He's the only one who will always love us perfectly. We get disappointed when we think a human can do that, right? That a human can fill that space in us. Psalm 90, verse 14 says, satisfy us in the morning with your unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad all our days. Fifth, what God has done and who he is brings us joy. What God has done and who he is, that brings us joy. We need to count our blessings and look to him. Look at him, look what he's done, and look at who he is. That brings us joy. Psalm 92, verses 4 through 5 says, for you make me glad by your deeds. Lord, I sing for joy at what your hands have done. How great are your works, Lord. How profound your thoughts. Anne Voskamp, in the book 1,000 Gifts, I love this quote. She says, as long as thanks is possible, then joy is always possible. That's awesome. Sixth, God's comfort brings us joy. He's the only one that can truly support us and comfort us in our anxiety and the trials of life. Do we run to him first? Or do we maybe even dismiss him, even helping us with our anxiety, and think we have a more enlightened approach? Psalm 94 corresponds with this in verses 18 and 19. When I said my foot is slipping, your unfailing love, Lord, supported me. When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy. Seventh, being righteous and doing the right thing brings joy. Psalm 97, verse 11. Light shines on the righteous and joy on the upright in heart. And I'm sure this list is not even exhaustive. These are just the initial ones I found as I was digging in and exploring the topic of joy in the Bible. And that's where each of these points came from. But I'm sure you can find more. So maybe that will be a fun challenge for you. I hope that you'll join me in part 2 for more on responding in times of crisis and even personal tragedy. Thank you.